So welcome to this video on how to make, or how I make, an archery bracer or an arm guard for archery. Now, many of you who know me for Leathercraft probably don't know I also enjoy archery, something I do on the side. And recently I got some almighty string slap on my forearm. Not from necessarily holding it incorrectly, I was twisted out, as you can see that's where the bruise is. Probably the grip, something like that. I was at a 3D range shooting at an odd angle and I got the slap. Now this is the temporary one that I recently bought going into an archery shop just to check it out. I felt bad not buying anything, so I just picked something up to buy it, and this was it. My old one is actually donkey's years old and really worn out, and but it's thin material on the side, stretchy, and this had rotated, and that's where I got the slap. Anyway, who cares? Moving on, I promised myself being a leather worker, I would eventually make myself a nice arm bracer. It's just finding the time. And now I've got the motivation. Let's just go ahead and make one. So I did a couple of quick prototypes yesterday of various different designs, see what fits me best and the style that I like the most. And the one that I really enjoyed making was this style here with the extra eyelets. Now I will be using some rather unusual materials. It's not just a single piece of leather, but alas, you can make this. There is a PDF below which you can download free of charge if you wish to make this for yourself. This is what it looks like. Okay, so you get the PDF with extra large, large, medium, and small. Okay, I'm going to go with large. What I recommend you do is print them all out, cut them out, and then place one each on your arm and see if that works for you. You might actually want a small one. You might want something that encompasses your arm a little bit more. But just be aware, the taper that I've chosen for this matches the taper of my forearm. So if you have, different tapered forearms, you might need to adjust it very slightly. 3 different materials, or 3 different leathers that I'll be using. On the exterior, going very fancy, this is a chocolate brown, dark chocolate brown alligator tail. The scales go this way, so that's how I'll be using it. That is not particularly overly soft, but it is quite flexible, and that's not really going to hold. And if you wanted to make this scallop design, you definitely wouldn't want something soft because the elastic tends to pull these in and you start getting rucking on your arm. That's something to avoid. That's one of the benefits of using more eyelets. So that's the exterior. It's just something different. I have it. That just happens to be in my workshop. This is 2mm stiff vegetable tanned leather, okay? Doesn't need to be black, just needs to be firm, and that's it. And on the inside, for grip and breathability, we have some pigskin suede. Now this has a lot of grip to it compared to vegetable tan leather, which would have none, but it's also very breathable. Pigskin is very permeable. This happens to be full grain leather, but you don't use this side. As you can see, it's clearly marked all over the place. Use this side, the suede side. So if you are going to match exactly what I'm making here today, we've got about 1mm pigskin, about 1.5, 2mm crocodile, and 2mm veg tan. Now, if you want to keep this real simple, just get yourself some russet, okay, undyed vegetable tan leather, or dyed, doesn't matter, whatever color you want, and you can still make this arm guard out of that. Just make sure it's reasonably thick. Let's just double check what this is. We're looking at 3.5mm. I'd say something around 3 to 3.5. 4 is going to get a bit thick, and it's not going to flex at all. 2.5, that's, it'd have to be very firm to be 2.5. So 3.5mm. No idea what that is in ounce weight. Apologies. I work in actual measurement. So, other materials that you're going to need is leatherworking thread. This is 18 4-cord linen thread. It's just some old barber's thread. Thick polyester will also work. This is 3mm bungee cord. Okay, this also happens to be in a chocolate brown, which matches this quite nicely. I actually think a nice burnt orange would have worked with that, but I've made my choice. And also these eyelets here. I had these were in the drawer, these were in stock They are just single piece eyelets, brass, 4mm internal width. If you can get hold of the two parts, one that looks like, you know, one of these eyelets here, but it also has a ring on the other side, those are a little smarter, probably a little bit better. I just didn't have those in that size. So those are the other materials that you'll need if you want to make this. If you're using thick vegetable tanned leather, you could probably get away with just hole punching and not using the eyelets, but I would still use eyelets. Okay, I'm going to grab a little bit of craft card here and some paper adhesive. This is about 0.8mm thick, this card. I don't know, what's that, 300 GSM, something like that, 350. And just some paper glue. Wet your finger. Spread it out evenly, get it off your fingers. And we're just going to let this set up for a few minutes so that the paper doesn't tear when you cut it. Okay, the sides are straight, just makes it easier for you guys to cut out as well. So placing a ruler along the straight sides. You can use whatever blade you want, rotary cutter works quite well. We'll work the corners in a second. Taking a nice sharp blade. Then I'm going to carefully cut the corners, remembering to turn the work at the same time. Okay, you can alternatively just do lots of straight cuts and turn at the same time. It's completely up to you. If you have like a French curve or something round, it's a 20mm radius, just so that you know. Now, you don't have to knock these out at this point if you don't want to. All the little holes there, you've got a 4mm circle, or at least you do on the large one. Or you can take an awl or a spike and just press it through the middle. As you can see, there's a crosshair on each one. Okay, so that's what we have so far. Now the first thing that I'm going to cut out is my vegetable tanned leather. Now on this, a little bit difficult to see on the black table and my navy overalls, but this is our black leather. There's a natural curve to it that you might be able to see. So I'm going to exploit that. It naturally wants to curve that way. We'll take what we can get. So I'm just going to roughly cut this out first of all. So just very slightly oversized. Now what I can do is take a couple of pattern weights, or in this case just some door stops that I use. And that's just going to make sure that everything stays down. Now if you have something sharp, even just a needle will do. In this case, this is a scratch all, leatherworker's scratch all. I'm going to go around the outside. The reason I'm doing this first before cutting is if the pattern moves, it's much easier for me to tell. So first of all, going round, you know, it'd be lovely just to go all the way through in one go, but my recommendation is always a primary guide cut first of all, just lightly scoring it all the way around. Less force, more accuracy. Taking your time. And then on the second one, you can go all the way through. And the first cut will act as a guide when you use a little bit more force. You'll want to stay in that like a bicycle wheel stuck in a tram line. So what I'm going to do now is take a little 4mm punch. They do come in handy. I'm just marking this. The reason being is a punch actually expands as it goes through, so with the thickness of the leather you'll end up destroying the pattern and you won't be able to use it again. Now I could just follow through. So there we are. It's already starting to look a little bit more like an arm guard. You'd probably get away with using that, to be honest. Have a feel. What does that feel like? Okay, moving it around. Did you pick the right size? If you find at this point, or maybe it's a little bit long, if I do that, I can actually feel it pinch. Feel free just to take a little scallop out of there and a little scallop out of there. It will still work just the same, no problems at all. It will just be a little bit more contour to your dimensions. Now, just to thin this down on the edges to make them fold a little bit easier, and also to allow this to contour into full thickness and then contour off full thickness, I'm going to do something called skiving, and this is using a machine to go around the edges and just take away about half the thickness. You can do this with a skiving knife, go around the edges, okay, but it takes 2 seconds with the machine, so I'll be using that. If you don't have this, it's not essential that you do this. I'm just doing it because it's there and it's available, so why not? Okay, so that's what that looks like. It just makes the ends taper on and taper off, but also a little bit more flexible as they go around. And that is what came off. Next, we're going to take some sandpaper or a roughing tool, and what we need to do is roughen both sides of the leather. The inside just happens to be the grain layer. It doesn't really matter because this is just adding stiffness to our support, and that's it. So sandpaper or a roughing tool, and this just allows a glue to get purchase on the leather. Same thing on the other side. Okay, I'm going to do the inside first, which is here, and I'm going to adhere that to something that's going to be a bit more comfortable and grippy, which is this nice piece of tan pig skin. So I'm going to cut a piece out, slightly larger, and now on the inside here, I'm going to place down some contact adhesive, and the same on this side of the suede, okay? So not the face side, which is the side that always faces out, but on the inside. Now, while this is drying, I want this leather to stay curled so it naturally wants to form around my arm. So I'm just going to exercise it between my fingers a little bit, get the fibers to conform, and then we can glue the interior on in this position and the exterior so that it never wants to go flat. It always wants to conform around your forearm. Okay, so I'm going to place that down there now. Keep it curved, move skin around the curve. Excellent. Press it in with whatever you have, rolling pin. Yeah, that grips really nicely as well. Okay, now you can use a knife, you can use a pair of scissors, thin skin like this, scissors is fine. Make sure you don't cut into your vegetable tanned leather. For those not in the know, vegetable tanned leather is skins that have been tanned using vegetation, usually tree bark, twigs, things like that. Takes longer. Doesn't necessarily make a better kind of leather, it just makes a different kind of leather. It's fit for a purpose. Each layer that we're using here is different for a purpose. So now that's cut out. I'm going to carry on and hole punch all the way through here. The reason we're not putting all 3 layers on, cutting it all out and then doing it afterwards is because if you guys don't have a lot of experience and you mess up right at the end, that's devastating because there's absolutely nothing you can do about it at this point, okay? Whether or not you've used exotic skins or just some couch leather, it really doesn't matter. It's going to be quite devastating. So if you're doing it as you go along, you can rectify mistakes and you're also less likely to make them. So it's just insurance and it doesn't take much longer, so why not? Okay, so now it's time to add the final layer on the outside. I've got a bit of an imperfection here. This isn't the best example of, fine crocodile, but I don't need it to be. One little thing you need to make sure, if the 0.1% of you who actually have this in stock and go, yeah, why not? I also do archery and leatherwork. Just don't go this way because the string is going to hit these edges, okay? The edges of these tiles, as they're called. Always make sure it's going to be going that way. And what I'm going to do quickly is just take an iron, okay, literally a clothing iron on low heat setting, and just go over this, and what it does is any high spots, it just compresses them down with heat and it will stay there. Okay, yeah, it's definitely flatter now, so that's good. Turning it over, making sure there's no debris on there. We're going to need to apply contact adhesive here on the flesh side, not the face side, the flesh side of this, and the roughened side here. Okay, so we'll be like so. Now I want it central to this set of tiles here, which happen to be nice and concentric. So just making sure the blemish here that I want to avoid, and the central line. Okay, so try and make sure you don't have any glue on your fingers. Okay, I've already failed at that. We're going to place this down straight first of all. We want to keep it nice and bent. Okay, especially towards the front. Here's the wrist area. Get that down. Get the front down. Okay, in the center. Just going to rock that to one side. And then rock that to the other. And then get that pressed in. Just going around the edges. And now we can go around and very carefully cut it out. Again, whatever you're comfortable with, scissors, knife, it's all good. Changed my mind, it's starting to get a little bony towards the end. There you go, you can hear one. That's why these animals are so tough, they are armor plated. And at this stage we can go around and then finish off our holes. So on the inside you can see them, obviously not on the outside. Here we are, all the holes in place. So now we need to stitch all three layers together. And to do that, we're going to use a pricking iron. Okay, this is an old set of Wooter pricking irons from, I think, their earlier designs. And the size on this is 3.85 millimeters. Okay, so that's the stitch width. And the first port of call here is to go around the outside and just mark where you want your stitches to go. So we're going to mark a line. You can use a fixed creaser, or in this case an adjustable one. If you don't have this, what you can do is just use a regular compass and a pen, and you can use something to mark around for your stitches. So if you're brand new to leatherwork and you want to give this a go with some simple veg tan, that's something that you can do. Now this curved block here, this is like a yoga block or something, I think, is going to assist me. First of all, I just want to double check that our stitching, if I make a line here, our stitching is going to bypass these holes quite nicely. The width I'm working with now is 4 millimeters, so 4 mils from the edge. You can apply a little bit of heat to this, or you can just use pressure. I think I might actually add some heat. Quick test. No burning. Yeah, that's better. And I'm going to go all the way around, marking exactly where I want my stitches to go. So now we've gone around, and you might be able to see a faint line there that I'm going to be following with the side of my pricking iron. Okay, you can go over the top. I'm going to go on the side here. Makes it easier to follow. If you don't have something like this, you could use like some chunky PVC pipe or something similar. At worst, you can actually press it flat. It just doesn't really want to. It's going to resist you all the way. Starting in the corner somewhere, you may end up with a long or short stitch, so this rear bottom corner is going to be seen the least for those who are worried about that. And moving up, placing the first prong in the last hole. You can go all the way through, or you can mark it as it's meant to do. And then as you stitch, use a bladed awl to cut the hole fully. But being as it's not so thick, I'm just going to go all the way through. And then just making a way around the perimeter. So I'm taking a good 1.5 arm spans of thread on this one. Almost 2 arm spans, and I'm just pulling it through a little block of beeswax just to add water resistance and make the stitching process much easier. Even if you buy leatherworking waxed thread, it's always a good idea to add some yourself right before stitching. Then just pull it through some cloth at high speed just to melt it in and take off the excess. So starting in the bottom corner here, equalizing the thread. Now if you're not familiar with hand stitching and it's something that you would like to try and learn how to do, I do have a free course available on how to hand stitch, and I'll put it in a pop-up for you when you go and get the PDF. So if you click the link below, go get the PDF to download it, and I'll put a pop-up there, so if you do want to learn how to saddle stitch, then you can do so. If you already know how to do it and you're happy with that, then that's fine. Get it in there, a little bit of tension, let it sink in, and we're good. And now we're going to stitch all the way around. So now the stitching is complete. That's what we're looking like at the moment. So all hand stitched all the way around. We're now going to fit the eyelets or grommets. Now, as I mentioned before, the 2-piece grommets are probably a little bit better. I'm going to use what I have in here. So we're going to need about 10, aren't we? And these are 4mm and 4mm holes. Should be slightly snug fit. If they are, just going to use a round or tapered one. You can buy these off eBay real cheap. Push that in there just to open it up temporarily. I'm going to go along. You might not need to open up the hole too much. And when you buy the grommets, just be sure what kind of thicknesses you're going to be working with, because some of them have different thickness stems or shafts, depending on what you want to call them. Some work with thin leathers, some work better with thicker leathers. Now this little tool opens up the eyelets. A lot of the time your eyelets will actually come with this tool because they're really cheap to produce. These are also good for snap fasteners, snap buttons. Worst case scenario, just get a Phillips screwdriver and press it in until you push all the little kind of like petals, if you were, out to the outside edges, and then you can tap them down. But essentially you just place the protrusion, like the little nipple at the end, inside and tap down. Against a plastic surface, shouldn't damage the metal too much. Yeah, they're nicely done still. Make sure you've pressed the leather down into the surface. What's happening is these little metal petals are expanding and holding onto the leather. We want to make sure that they're well below the surface so you can't feel them. If they're still protruding, you need to tap them down a little bit more, or just go in a circle which does kind of similar thing, and that way your arm's not going to get scratched. So there we go, grommets are in place, and they're nice and close to the edge as well, and that way you can really pull those edges in rather than having them further in and this edge kind of almost sticks out. So having it nice and close to that edge really gets it to curve in when it's under tension. So let's finish these edges. Now you can just use dye, go around the edges. You could use a little acrylic resin. You could even use wood-based, water-based acrylic finishes if you really wanted to, but it's better to use leatherworking stuff. I'm going to use Leatherworkers edge paint, but before we do that, I'm going to bevel the edges. Many of you won't have an edge beveler, but if you do, this is what they look like, and what they do is just take off the very edge. They knock it off and round it. Well, I seem to have hit bone there. Okay, a little more difficult to go around on exotics because of the textured surface, but essentially we're just rounding it. Gives it a nice appearance, makes edge finishing a little neater, and also slightly less likely to catch anything. And if you really sharpen it well, you can actually knock off just that excess on the suede as well. Now, it's a good idea just to go around, level the edges, any excess glue on there, any rough bits. Just using a sanding pad. I dare say a Dremel with a mini drum sander would probably make light work of this, to be honest. Now I'm going to take some leather edge paint and just go around the edges and seal them off. 1 to 2 layers, and if you do more than a single layer, just make sure that you use some fine grit sandpaper and just key up the surface, remove any lumps or bumps, and then put the next layer on. And if you don't have anything to apply it with, even a pencil will do. That's absolutely fine. So there we have it. Edge is finished. Just 1 layer. Grommets in, stitched all the way around. We're now ready to assemble. So already feels pretty good. Contoured to the arm perfectly. So now we need something that's going to keep it on there permanently. So for that, I'm going to take some of this, which is our bungee cord. This is 3mm, 3mm thick. 4 might get a little bit uncomfortable and it's a little unnecessary, okay? A true 2.7, 2.8. Any thinner than that and it's not going to be particularly durable. So the way we're going to do this is we're going to go around the outside, starting at the front, and then holding the ends, pull through. This end is actually going to stay over here like so. And you don't want to do it too tight. And we're going to start with one random side. And I'm going to find the next side, one up, okay, which is this one here. So going around the outside, okay, so over the top, the outside part, into the next one. We're not going to the horizontal one, we're skipping one, going around the outside. And again, skipping one around the outside. Okay, so we have a tag end. Opposite side, we just need to thread it through all the spare holes that we have. Outside and then underneath, or over the top, doesn't matter, just keep it consistent. And finally, outside. Okay, so there it is in place, ready to use. And this feels pretty comfortable actually. So got a little bit of excess here that we might need to trim up in a second. But what I'm going to do is actually a bit of an experiment I haven't tried before. What I've done is used some of these little cutters that you can get in a kit on eBay and Amazon. They're actually really cheap, to cut out some little ovals of leather of a similar colour. And then I've taken some of these small Chicago screws. I think these are 10mm stem length on the 8mm length. And I've taken the female side, the female stem, and pushed that through, one on each side. And the idea is, let's see if this works, is we can get that through there, like so. Place the next one over the top. And then put the male side in. And hopefully, it should still, if we pull firmly enough, yeah, it still does come through with resistance. So for the sake of OCD, let's bring these in alignment, like so. Let's try that again. So there we go. I reckon that's about right. It's good tightness, allows for good movement. All we need to do now is just trim the ends and tie a knot so they don't come through there, and we're good to go. Now I'm going to leave about 2.5, 3 inches because I'm testing it out and sizing it for a bare forearm at the moment. However, if I'm wearing clothing, a jumper, the weather's a bit colder, I want to have just a little bit of excess. So I'm going to tie a knot in here, and that leaves us enough. Alternatively, you could just size it for how your bare forearm is, and then when it's winter time, just use, usually buy this in like 5-meter lengths, just have another length for winter clothing. All right, let's go shoot with it and see how it works. Seems pretty good.